Good to see you, everyone. My name is Robbie Howell. I am a little sick, as you can probably hear, and as such, what better time for an AoE2 DLC to drop, as is becoming customary when I am sick. This is huge news, and I had to get a video out, so today we're going to talk about Chronicles, and why I am not universally hailing it as the future of AoE2, like I am sure so many of you probably rightfully are. I think there's a lot of good in this DLC, as I'll get to, but there are also several reservations I have, as I will also get to. As always, please like and subscribe, join our Discord, link in the description, and support me on Ko-Fi, also link in the description if you have a few bucks to spare. Let's dive into it. So, to summarize my thoughts before we begin, the format holds a lot of promise, like a lot. It incorporates a lot of ideas that I and many others have proposed in the past, which tells me that someone over at World's Edge is listening, which is great. And the dev team behind this DLC did great work. All of the reservations I have about this are not directed at the devs. I think they did a fan-fucking-tastic job, and we should give them kudos for it. That being said, I feel like this DLC could have been done better in a number of ways. Pushing boundaries is good, which they did. Approachability is good too, though less so in my opinion. But this feels like a very awkward middle ground between boundary pushing and approachable, and I'll get into a little bit of why I think that a little later. The price also is something I'm a little dubious of, and most notably, the reason I am dubious about the price is that this is unlikely to be improved upon or iterated upon. It is a standalone thing, which means that it should be held to higher pricing standards. Again, we'll talk about that more a little later. So this is why I'm a little hesitant to declare this the future of AoE2 and throw all of my support behind it. But there's definitely a chance that it'll just blow me away going forwards and completely change my mind in future. So just know, these are only the thoughts that I have based on what limited information is available to us as of now. If my issues with this format are resolved, I think it's the future of AoE2. Now, let's talk about the good. And there's a lot of good. There's quite a lot of good to be had in this DLC. Mostly down to the very talented dev team. Beginning with the aesthetics, the flavor is very nice. The new architecture sets, especially the Achaemenids, are lovely. I really like them. The unit reskins and renames look great. Some of the renames, as I'll get into, are like kind of tilting to me personally. And the authenticity overall is okay. Like, it feels reasonably appropriate for the era, and though I will say the images in particular do a great job. The voice lines sounded great too. Haven't heard many people talking about that, but nicely done on those. I think the overall presentation is very, very nice. The Rome at War and Capture Age teams are obviously very good at what they do, and their passion and attention to detail is so palpable in what we've seen in like the trailers and stuff thus far. Obviously, adopting popular community creators and creations is a long and proud Age of Empires tradition. It's great to see that continued. And in particular, I want to highlight the campaign screen. It looks so nice. And according to a lot of the sources that we've seen from content creators and the like, the cutscenes are really excellent as well. So, great presentation, guys. Looks beautiful. And it really demonstrates the AoE2 engine's potential. This doesn't look forced whatsoever. It feels like the classical era aesthetics slot beautifully into the Age of Empires 2 core engine, though the tech tree not so much, as I will get into a little bit later. But before that, let's talk about another thing I really liked, the mechanics. This is clearly pushing the conventional boundaries of Age of Empires 2, which is awesome. They're clearly eager to try stuff out, but are being held back doing it in the main game because of competitive sensibilities. But in this sort of arena, they can do whatever they want, which is really cool to see. And so this brings in some of the most hyped elements of Rome at War, like the dock overhaul, though that's watered down, and branching unique technologies, and implements them quite satisfyingly. And it also gives some big steps with current mechanics like auras. Special shout out to that one technology that gives units more attack based on how many enemies are nearby. Some of my favorite new mechanical implications that were added were things like individually upgrading buildings. I called it. I've been proposing this thing for ages, such as for my proposed rework for the fortified church that I did on my Outre-Marin build. Take a look at that up here if you haven't seen it. Also the policies mechanic, which can be obviously extrapolated out to like modular bonuses that are swappable mid-game. I really, really like that. Oysters, which lends itself to new resource node types overall. Love that as well. Trade income toggling, allowing you to choose what resources you get from trade. There is so much potential in that mechanic. And overall, all these mechanical iterations to me could be indications that they are testing the waters for the main game. Maybe if certain mechanics are well liked in Chronicles, we will get to see real civilizations getting access to them. Now, last thing I want to talk about that I really like about this DLC is the implications that it brings. First of all, modding assets. There's new skins for units and buildings. I think they have something like 50 plus completely new unit models. Not to mention new mechanics to explore that will hopefully be available in the Genie engine and or scenario editor. It's also possible that even the new ways they're structuring campaigns, like branching paths, will also be made available to modders and scenario designers, which they should do. I think that would be a fantastic idea and enable a ton of community creativity, not to mention giving a few people more reason to buy the damn thing. Another big implication this has is replayability with branching paths between the scenarios. This was mentioned by a couple of content creators with early access, and if this is actually meaningful, like if the decisions are a big deal, it could be a huge game changer and insanely fun. My dream would be that it plays something like StarCraft 2 campaigns, like especially the Wings of Liberty one, where you can majorly upgrade units between missions. That would be so fun. Another one, crossplay. Thank fuck they did not skimp on crossplay. If these things had not been able to be played alongside like normal AoE2 civs, I would have rioted, right? But this is really important to have. It's fine that it's not competitive. I don't care about that. As long as you can goof around with your friends or on single player, I'm happy with crossplay. Though I think that you could go further within it. And of course, they absolutely do not need to be competitively balanced to be implemented in the way that they are now. Last thing I really like about the implications is that they are nesting sub-games within AoE2. I have been advocating for this for a long time. I had a video about DLC proposal. You can check it out up there. And nesting sub-games is one of the main things I mentioned. I think this is the best way to ensure AoE2 remains healthy over the coming decades. And it just has a really fantastic engine that we should capitalize upon. Though, as I will get into later, I think that starting with the classical era is not a great idea, though not because it doesn't fit AoE2's engine. I think the engine applicability is fantastic. So overall, really, really good stuff. But from here, I'd like to move on to the bad, or rather, what I am concerned about. First of all, I want to talk about ROR. Remember that? Remember that DLC introduced the Romans to AoE2? Everyone hated it. I love pre-Middle Ages history, and there's many of you out there who are in my same boat, and I feel like this Chronicles thing is a bit of a slap in the face to us. Because think about it. True Age of Empires Antiquity fans will have bought AoE1 DE, then bought Return of Rome, both of which sucked ass, and now they buy this as well. So that's $50. $35 of which has seen all but zero fucking support, I should add. This, what we see with Chronicles, this is what Return of Rome should have been. I will fight to the frickin' death on that. Just think about how all of this amazing production value could have been funneled into ROR and made it feel so much more worthwhile than just like Age of Empires 1 but 10% less shit, right? Because let's be real. How many of you guys still play ROR? Any? Maybe one? I doubt it. I bet a bunch of you play the Romans. I bet that's why most of you bought the damn thing. So imagine instead if Chronicles were released when ROR was, or ROR was just delayed until now, and you still got the Romans or whatever to play in AoE2, and then you got all of this Chronicles content instead of another crappy AoE1 rehash. I don't know about you guys, but to me, that sounds like a much better proposition. Obviously, we can't really change it now, but it does feel like a serious missed opportunity to me. And that leads me to why this period? Why the classical era? A medieval setting using like sub-civs of existing civilizations or something, I think would have been a way better idea. And then from there, you can expand to other eras, including the classical era. I love the idea of bringing classical era stuff to the AoE2 engine, but why start with it? It feels very stilted to me, especially because of how they crammed classical military into the AoE2 tech tree, which I really don't like. And speaking of that, that's the next major problem I have with it, is that it is mostly a reskin. The tech tree parity is what I dislike the most about this, mechanically speaking. It feels incredibly shoehorned. Now, the new graphics are very nice, right? But the units themselves, with a couple of exceptions, are not different enough. Not to mention there are these like lazy renames that don't have like a new graphic or anything, like baggage carriers in particular, that really annoy me on a personal level. So why not just have a whole new tech tree? Or like a similar tech tree with like big tweaks along the way to make it feel properly like classical antiquity and not just like an ambitious mod. Crossplay isn't an excuse, by the way. There are enough differences between these civilizations and conventional AoE2 civilizations, especially the dock overhaul, that make it so that there isn't parity in crossplay whatsoever. And yet, since it's not competitive, who cares? Give them a proper classical era tech tree and still let people crossplay just for the heck of it. It doesn't need to be balanced. Just let them have fun while being more authentic and giving us more unique value. Now, on the other hand, if the excuse behind the tech tree parity is to make it more approachable, quote unquote, then again, why start in the classical era outside the Middle Ages? If you wanted it to be approachable, use Middle Ages civilizations, keep the tech tree like the same on purpose, and make the differences way more targeted and pointed. And on top of that, I feel like in large part the innovations that they do have don't really go far enough. The dock change, for example, it's cool, it's great to see, but it is still mostly just like a watered down version of the Rome at War thing, which people love, by the way, and don't have any problems with. So why water it down? Why not commit and like really push the dock? I think that would have been sick. And if not specifically the dock, why not like completely overhaul another building like the archery range or barracks rather than just, you know, adding in the hoplite, which just feels pretty boring, to be honest. Yes, the aura is cool, but the rest of it I don't love. Although getting an armor aura at last is a big yes. Now, the authenticity overall is a step up from the base game. Big time step up. With some major exceptions. The exceptions mostly come down to like the forced tech tree parity. For example, they retained the mangonel. Really, mangonels wouldn't appear until like 580. But whatever, it's better than Age of Empires 2 at base. And I will say that this lack of innovation is overall my least important concern. Some innovation is infinitely better than no innovation, and they definitely did do some. So I'm happy with that. That's great. I think the tech tree parity is a much bigger problem than this, as are the other concerns that I have previously and soon to be mentioned. There is a ton of potential, though, to take the innovations further, and if they do pursue this format, which I tentatively hope they do, they really need to push the innovation further to make it worth our time and money to play instead of the base game or a good mod. I would expect more if we get another Chronicles, though I think this one is a fine proof of concept, and again, has many virtues in and of itself. Now, last thing I want to mention is the dubious value, getting down to the price tag of it. So, the thing you got to remember about Chronicles, it is separate from the AoE2 landscape, especially competitive, of course. I don't really care about that too much because you can crossplay, right? You have the assets if you're a modder. But remember that this individual Chronicles DLC is unlikely to be updated or added to. Now, maybe I'm going to be proven wrong about this. I hope I'm proven wrong. It would be awesome if I were proven wrong. But I feel like unless we kind of push them that we really want this, there's a very, very good chance that when you pay for this DLC, you're going to get it in this state and it is never going to change. And there are many games like that out there, right? It's $15 for 3 civilizations as a big campaign, and that's okay on paper. But remember that when you buy a normal DLC, you're also upgrading the entirety of the rest of your AoE2 experience in terms of not only very facile crossplay, but also the competitive landscape and having those civilizations pop up in existing campaigns. But most importantly, those civilizations are very likely to get updated and balance patched in future. And so because you don't have any of that, I think that $15 for 3 civilizations in a big campaign is insufficient value. For that kind of price, I want more than just a reskin. I want serious tech tree innovations, which we do not have here. Along those lines, I want to point you to what I call the hour to dollar ratio. Now, maybe you guys are more willing to spend money on video games than me, but I'm actually very picky when it comes to this. How replayable will Chronicles exactly be? Like, will there ever be a reason to go back to it in future? When I got the Conquerors on CD, back when I was 8, I think, 7 or 8, I got like thousands of hours out of that. And that was like $30 at the time, probably $60 now. That's a really good hour to dollar ratio. And branching paths in this DLC could help a lot with this. But again, if you have a lower bar than me for spending money on video games, this doesn't apply to you. I bring it up because I believe we can and we should ask for more than we are getting, because it will upgrade the quality of our experience and it will earn the devs more of our loyalty and investment in the game. Now, the other reason I'm a little dubious is, will this be the new AoE2 DLC norm? Will we get conventional DLCs after this? And if the answer is no, then I reject this entirely. This should not replace typical DLCs. And I am very wary of what I'm going to call the Assassin's Creed cycle, where they just resell us the same crap every year with a new coat of paint. If this Chronicles shit just ends up being like kinda reskinned AoE2 with admittedly a really polished and beautiful campaign for $15 a year, count me out. I am not interested whatsoever. If they can actually innovate on it, give us more value, give us more tech tree innovations, give us more modding assets, give us more potential for crossplay and for a single purchase of this to elevate the entirety of our Age of Empires 2 game experience, I'm in. But we'll get to that later. I will also note it does potentially split the base into like cash cow casuals and orthodox ladderers who like poo-poo on Chronicles and shun the people who play it. But I'm not like as worried about that. I feel like that's kind of inevitable anyways. So I won't get into this as much now as I kind of want to. Now, from here I want to move into my last little section, which are suggestions. What would assuage my particular concerns going forwards? And if you share my concerns, maybe you would find some value in these suggestions as well. First one, most importantly, up the value. I would love to see a roadmap for some free updates for this Chronicles DLC. For example, maybe one new civilization, half a dozen new scenarios, all of which are unlocked by those who beat the campaign. And maybe add some new game-wide functionality. Like, for example, that enabling branching paths for scenarios for modders, just have that be a default thing that you can do when you're creating a scenario or campaign. That would be fantastic and a great way to add value. I would also love to see some changes to the lazy unit and tech reskins to be more tangibly different in a way that fits with this era. For example, archers had a different function at this point in history. It was more infantry dominated, and to represent that, what if we nerfed the archer line in general so that it was just strictly worse than the archer to arbalister is in AoE2, but we changed the skirmisher to a peltist that did not have a bonus against archers, instead it had a bonus against infantry. That way, the archer gets slightly buffed by not having a default counter, and then infantry would have an archer type unit that was a little bit specialized against it. I don't know about you guys, I think something like that would be very, very cool, and a way to help differentiate this more from base AoE2, which I think it needs. Another way you can up the value is find other ways to integrate it with the current game. Here's an idea I had I thought was really cool. Maybe we can chronicle port a couple Return of Rome civilizations and enable crossplay with them if you own both DLCs. So this would obviously be like updating some of the AoE1 civs to more like a classical era iteration. Maybe we could get like the Neo-Assyrians, Neo-Babylonians, Syracusans, Etruscans, people who were relevant between like the first millennia and 200 BC. Now, the reason I bring this up particularly is because it would give Return of Rome some more value. You'd get two birds with one stone. You can give a bone to those poor antiquity lovers who have bought all these crappy DLCs and not gotten any long-term value out of them. So give them that value now. And before you say, oh, that would be the devs wasting free dev. No. They wouldn't be wasting their time. Because you do something like this, it will encourage people to pick up Return of Rome if they don't already have it. And it will encourage people who previously didn't want to pick up Chronicles to be like, well, you know, it has sufficient value now, I'm going to pick it up. That is why you do this sort of thing for free. Because it's going to pay off when more people are convinced that you're not just trying to rip them off. Next thing I want to add, innovation. Obviously, I mentioned that the current version has insufficient innovation for my particular taste, and I do think that future installments of Chronicles should push the game's boundaries further. Make them feel like more than just a reskin. Fresh tech trees, new unique mechanics, all that stuff. I'd love to see more scenario design, campaign structuring, and similar like out-of-game changes in particular. That would be so cool. Give us more ways to build the game, because that's the sort of thing that people will be able to sink endless hours into. And remember, these need to clear a higher bar than conventional DLCs because they have less recurrent value because they are not as directly integrated with AoE2's base game. Now, the next thing I'd like to see is the next 2 to 3 chapters refocused on the Middle Ages. Bring us back to where AoE2 starts before we extrapolate out in different directions. But once we get like a couple chapters in the Middle Ages, go wherever you want. I'd love to see it, especially if there's some way they can be like linked together either spatially or temporally. Just remember, this should not be an excuse to skimp on innovation. Don't just give us the same boring AoE2 tech tree. Add stuff. This should be a field for fresh new ideas. I would love to see some really specific civilizations that wouldn't fit in the current game, not because I don't want them there, but because people would whinge about them, that could be brought into highlight through Chronicles. Silesians, everyone, go check out my Silesians build. That's an example of a civ that, while I'd love to see it in the base game, it will probably never be there. But if we want to go more specific, what about something dynastic that conventional AoE2 logic dictates wouldn't belong? We have the Achaemenids in this Chronicles, so what if we brought in the Sasanians specifically as another Chronicles civilization? The thing that I want to see the most, though, is make sure that conventional DLCs continue. Slowing down is fine. I personally wouldn't have a problem with just 1 per year, right? But I'm telling you right now that conventional DLCs should not stop, both for the health of the game and because of the beautiful creative playground it gives us all. So, in conclusion, this format has a ton of potential. And the team is very talented. The ideas are great. They're clearly listening to the community. This is all intensely commendable, and I'm grateful for it. But this first installment, to me, is not worth $15. $12.74, which is the discount price in American, is better, but I personally would not pay more than $10. This needs to have more standalone value to justify its price tag. And if future installments innovate more and give us more value, I'm in. I'm sold. I'm on board. If they play their cards right, this could be the future of Age of Empires. But until then, I will not buy it, and I will probably not make content about it. So before you're like, oh, Robbie, do a video about what Chronicles we could have next, I'm not sold on the format. Once I am sold on the format, you can expect to see videos about that. But until then, I reserve my judgment. Thank you guys, as always, for taking the time to watch. Now I'd love to hear from you. What do you think of Chronicles? And do you think I'm being overly critical? Do you plan on buying Chronicles? I mean, I probably will not unless it goes on major sale or we see much more value coming out of it. But like I said, even though I'm being so harsh on this DLC, it's more because I think it has enormous potential than because I am unhappy with it. And like I said at the beginning, the team behind it is entirely blameless for the issues that I have. I am sure that they had instructions from above that greatly limited the ways that they could innovate and push the envelope with this thing. And I have no doubt that if they were let off the leash, they could do absolutely frickin' phenomenal things and will do so in future. And so I'd love to see what they can do, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about what I have to say in this video. I know I'm not giving the glowing review that I'm sure a lot of other content creators are, but these are my honest thoughts, and hopefully that's what you're here for. And so, until next Friday, my name is Robbie Howell, and ciao for now.